and college students. Programs with Vermont Arts Exchange. That's our art program. Highland Hall Gardens, 4 stars rated pre-K program.
Excuse me, that's not correct.
What?
It's a 5-star.
Okay,
rated
sorry.
program.
Okay,
That's important.
this is articles that will be voted on Australian ballot. Well, actually, the moderator, we do hear the moderator. The delinquent tax collector. I'm sorry,
So that's not correct, Ray.
what?
The delinquent tax collector is not up for reelection now, and it's a 2-year.
It's always been a 1-year, I think. I thought.
Well, it's not on the ballot. And
Because it was in last year's, so.
Yeah, well, okay, but I thought we were always doing delinquent tax annually. Well, I didn't actually make this up. Let's see. Okay, so,
Doug is not.
so, but
till the
you're not
following
up.
year. Doug
sorry.
and I are up in the same year and not this year,
Yeah,
next year.
that's what I think. Well, I'm sorry, but anyway, so, Doug, our treasurer, and Lori, our district clerk, were elected last year, so they're not up. They're not on here. Delinquent tax collector, you say it's also a 2-year term, so that's not on the ballot. It does have you on the ballot on this article. That's totally true. That's you? Yeah. Look it to be correct. Okay. Then, so with authorization for the district to borrow money, that is a floor item. We vote on that here. Then back to Australian ballot credential committee member, 3-year term. I'm a candidate for that. For a 2-year term, Lunny is the candidate for that. And then for we had a term that was not filled the last year of that term, unexpired, is Katie Montalban is running for that position. Okay, these are all Australian item budget, the ones that are what's on the ballot is the FY27 budget. See it there, $3,222,388 proposed. That's lower than last year by about 22,000, a small decline. And the last year's budget was lower than the 26 budget, was lower than the 25. Per pupil spending is 11,894 versus last year's 17,181. Based on the new long-term weighted average ADM, with ADM stands for average daily membership. Long-term is obvious. Weight, not so obvious. Weights were originally, when Act 60 and 68 were established, it was a fairly simple process. High school students or secondary students were 1s. Elementary students were a little less than 1, and there was weights for poverty and for English language learners that boosted those numbers. Well, that was not set up on a strictly rational basis. It was not based on research. So in the last two years ago, that research was undertaken and the legislature proposed new weights, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but they're significantly different in the case of poverty and even more in terms of English language learning. I would say about that per pupil spending, North Bennington used to be one of the highest spending districts in this SU. We are now the next to the bottom. The only lower district for next year would be Sandy. And I'll explain that when we get to the slide that shows the expenditures and the revenues. And that's a 5% increase for the tuition for the village school. And also all the other independent budgeted costs include a 5% increase. The cost for SVUESD, that's Southwest Vermont Union Elementary School District, that's Bennington, Shaftesbury, Woodford, Pownell. Those costs are set at what their budget says. We pay what their budget. Okay, so expenditures by budget category. This is a general summary based on the categories that the SU gives us. There is a sheet on the table that gives you can look into some of the detail in there. But this is a pretty good summary. You see that we're proposing that we'll spend about $22,000 less than last year. And you have to take into account that numbers of students are declining, but costs are going up, as you just heard. And so that you see up there on tuition, the top line. The tuition is for K-6 students. You see that there's a drop in the budgeted amount in this coming budget of $218,000. That's a significant drop. That's due to the number of students declining. And that creates that $22,000 difference down below, along with the debt service having gone down, but that's a minimal amount. Now, if we go to the revenue side of this, you'll see that the general state support grant, the top line, which is the education fund money that comes to the district, is going to be by almost $300,000 less. Okay, that's in part due to the decline in the tuition costs that we showed in the previous line of $22,000. But it's mostly due to the fund balance at the bottom here. The fund balance from FY would be FY 24-25 is one of our large fund balances. See, $326,000 there. This fund balance tends to go up and down annually. You know, 1 year will be high, next year will be low, and it's difficult to project. But for next year, that's what creates the low per pupil spending that we're showing here. As I said, among the districts of the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union, the only district lower spending is proposed is Sandy, which is another non-operating district, but they're K-12, not operating.
Question?
Yep.
Go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know if I should just interrupt or there's going to be a point for questions.
No, we said you could interrupt. Yes,
So, I don't understand the difference between cost per student and tuition. Why are those so different?
you don't understand what, sorry.
The cost per student is listed and the tuition that's listed, those are the items on the
Yep,
balance.
right.
They're very different. What is
Well-
it that makes them different?
Okay, well, there's a difference in cost. Yep, that's part of it. That's the, you know, with the arrangement we have with the village school is based on a lease agreement and a tuition agreement. And we agreed to, in the beginning, when we set this up, we agreed to pay their tuition as long as they followed all the rules of the state in terms of educating our students. At the time, that was not actually true of all independent schools. Now it's more or less true because the state Board of Education revised all those rules. And now they require things that we required of the village to do. Most of our special education children go here. Unless it's not possible to meet their needs. So we pay their cost based on their tuition, what they need for tuition to make the school work. The long-term average weighted, let's see, long-term weighted average daily membership figure is a new figure that the state came up with several years ago. And it's a 2-year average. And all I could, that's based on a chart, which I'm not showing here, but I will talk about later probably. There's a detailed breakdown of our student totals for both secondary and elementary. And that is a 2-year average. That's the average that is the denominator that divides into the total spending from the education fund. We don't, you know, there's more spending than what's in the education fund portion of this, because the education fund only pays for a portion of the cost. Obviously, you see that right there. You know, it's most of the cost, it's by a large amount, but there are local sources and then there's the fund balance that figure into paying bills for next year. And when you divide that general state support grant number by the long-term weighted average daily membership, the number you get is $11,000 and change. That's what our tax rate is based on, that number. But the tuition is something separate. It's a different arrangement, a different contract that we have with the village school.
So how is the tuition determined then?
That's not that's not what I'm gonna talk about, okay?
They're just very different and intuitively.
They are different. They are different, but you're talking about a number of students versus a number of tuition. And if you look at the details on the tuitions that are shown in the more detailed budget study, you'll see what's being paid out for students at various institutions. And for instance, it's not so different from the average, the K-6 average for the state for next year is roughly $20-some thousand per pupil.
I'm not trying to imply that there's something wrong, I'm just trying to.
No, I'm just trying to explain this to you. And I don't know if I'm getting it across, but for instance, some of our independent schools take the state average. Yeah, and for tuition, and that's been rising. So as I said, the state average is over $20,000 per pupil in the K-6 range. Across, which is an astounding figure, I'll tell you, yes, but it's there.
Let's choose the different way.
No, I'm going to move on. Thank you.
I'll try to take it later.
Yeah.
Well. Ray, I think that given that
Can we get through the slideshow, please?
given that we've that you've opened the floor to questions, I think it's fair to have, questions asked. This is we're here to dispose of I'll just say that this section of the meeting is to do the report of the officers. So there are several other points in the meeting where questions can be directed to different, parties, like the village school representative or something that might get to the information better. But, okay.
Yep, I've explained what I have explained at this, but can we move on? So, this is tuitions overview of tuitions, early childhood education. We pay for that through the supervisory union. Usually there are 20 to 25, maybe a few more, but right now this is a declining number of students in the 3 to 4 year old range that that it's a choice. The parent doesn't have to enroll their child in pre-K, but a lot of parents do enroll their child in pre-K. And so the cost of that is going up rather steeply. You can see there's a $61,000 increase over last year's budget for the pre-K education. The village school operates a pre-K. You have to be registered with the state and pass their certifications and qualifications. And they have a significant pre-K program here, which has children from outside the district. But we pay for students from our district that choose to come. K-6 tuitions, the request for that is $2,650,393, which is a $218,000 decrease. And we expect 130 students K-6. We had been writing more like in the 145 range, but this is declining, and that's because enrollments around in this area are declining pretty universally. There will be a chart later on that shows this.
You have a question, right?
Yep.
Ray?
Yep.
Hi, Jeannie Jenkins. I just wanted to clarify, when you say we, do you mean the district or do you mean the village school? When you say.
I mean the district.
You mean the district, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
This is the district presentation. Okay, so student services, this is the next slide. That's special education basically at both the pre-K level and mostly at the K-6 level. The legislature passed a new program several years back that is based on your average census. So there are allocations for special education based on the size of the district. North Bennington, because it has typically less numbers and that need special education, builds up a surplus over time. Last year, we had almost we had basically, the only thing we paid for special education was for administration. And, but now our surplus is depleted, so now we're paying for costs of the program again, for the students that we do have. So you see that increase there of, $108,000, and that's because of that decline in the surplus that we had, diminished costs of actually providing services last year. And administration is, a number of things are folded into that category. Most of them are supervisory union services that we participate in. There's a fairly substantial increase. Okay. Building expenses. So, the first item here explains, over, you notice over your head, all this ventilation pipe up here. So, last summer, it's last summer, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Last summer, this ventilation system was totally revamped. And there's a new unit up on top of the roof that powers all this. And the school relied for ventilation on what was called a gravity system, and David Aldrich called it a gravity system when he was still around. Basically, it's just hot air rises and cold air drops, and so that was what created the circulation in the building. Well, now we have makeup air coming in, and we have powered ventilation throughout the building. And maybe Tim will speak to that later on, how it's doing. Well, there was one other thing I wanted to. Sorry, on building. Can we go back again, Tim?
This is back.
That is back there. So, that ventilation system was paid for mostly by ARPA funds from COVID era, administered by the Efficiency Vermont. And in order to make that project go, we agreed to put aside $200,000 basically in case there were things that weren't covered in the contract that we had to deal with. And as it turned out, we only needed to use about 94,000 of that. And so the rest of it is in reserve for building expenses, because this building was, the oldest part of the building is from 1870. This part that we're in now was about 1930. And then we have a new part that's from 1998. It's an amalgam of a number of pieces, and it's an old building, so we have to deal with those. And Bennington Architects, because the designer of the system died before it was actually got constructed, Centerline Architects, we thank for their work in helping to pull the project together and get it done. And we also thank Tim and his staff because they were instrumental in doing this. Okay, enrollment curves. This is for most of the districts in the SU. And you can see that there's some steep, see Sandgate over the left, the other non-operating district, and they're kind of up and down quite a bit. But the SVU ESD which includes Bennington, is on a pretty steep, fairly steep downward slope. The SU overall, which includes all of this, that's the general slope there. Mount Anthony is on a decline. Arlington was going up and now is going down. North Bennington, we had an upsurge and now we're gliding down a little bit too, but I think we're probably the, next to Sandgate, we're the least loss. We don't know where that's going to go, but, the projection is not very good statewide, and I don't think it's, strong in this area as well, in terms of students. Okay, this compares tax rates. This is an old slide. It only goes through 2026 between North Bennington and Shaftesbury District 1. And Shaftesbury is on the right, the green, and the darker gray blue is North Bennington. And so last year, North Bennington's estimated tax, these are the estimated tax rates that appear in this report, was 148. And Shaftesbury was 131. Okay. And then if the next slide is what we estimate the tax rate to be this year. And then compared to the last year's estimate. So we rise, North Bennington picks up about 6 cents. And Shaftesbury picks up almost about 10 cents. And most of that, because the paradox is that we're showing less spending, less money from the education fund, but our tax rates are going to go up. And that's pretty much exclusively due to the common level appraisal, which our rate went down from 65 to 59% in North Bennington, and Shaftesbury's has gone down as well. So that affects the actual tax rate for each town. And then this is results of voting. I didn't update it, goes through FY23. The average votes are about 73% positive for the district budget. And that's, we thank you and invite questions, and certainly there should be some questions.
If there's no questions at this time, we can, are there any other officer reports other than the chair's report, Mr. Molyneux?
No. Okay.
Then Article 2 is to determine if the district will authorize the school board to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of taxes. And it's just for the sake of the meeting, can we just say why the board would be required to borrow money in anticipation of taxes?
Got it. Yep. Thank you, John.
Doug can speak to that.
Yeah.
I don't know anything.
So for those who don't know, my name is Doug Busey. I'm the treasurer for the North Bennington Graded School District, tax collector, and the treasurer for the village also. So the tax anticipation note that the district uses pretty much annually is due to timing. So the bills continue to come in all year long. Taxes aren't due until November. Bills don't go out until September. So pretty much that gap from August to November, the bills are still coming in, but the taxes haven't been collected. Typically by that time, as a fiscal year, July 1st, most of the funds, anything that's not in a reserve, has been spent. So you have those bills from that July 1st mark through when the taxes would be due. So what we typically do is we put something similar to a line of credit in place with a financial institution. It's used as needed. There's interest charged. Once taxes are collected, usually it's paid in full around December 1st, December 15th. Over the last couple of years, we've used in the range of $100,000 to $250,000. And then it's a market rate interest, it's paid in full, and that's the only borrowing outside of the bond that, that the district had many years ago. So that's kind of in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. Okay, thank you.
Great, so this is a floor item for vote, so I would entertain a motion to authorize the school board to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of taxes for Article 2. Been moved by Ms. Rogers. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Sarcantangelo. And any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Article 3 is to hold a public informational meeting on articles to be voted by Australian ballot on March 3rd. Tuesday, I assume, right?
It is, the polls will be open from 7 to 7 at the railroad station.
Tuesday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the depot. And that's this Tuesday, March 3rd.
Here's some sample ballots, if anyone wants to take a look at those, it's two-sided.
They're listed in the warning as well, so A, B.
Correct, the prudential committee members, the tuition amount and the budget amount.
So if you have a copy of the warning, or you've looked at the warning before you came today, Article A contains 3 items, electing a prudential committee member for a 3-year term.
So, John, if you'd like to know what those are, you're there, sure.
So the 3-year term is Mr. Molyneux, and that's unopposed. The 2-year prudential committee term is Lenny DePont de Sorda. That's a 2-year term, and that's also unopposed. And the 1-year unexpired term is Catherine Monavan, and that is also unopposed.
And I believe she's here
Oh,
today.
do you want to introduce yourself to the members here?
Stand up. Stand up.
Yeah, thank you very much for running for this seat. That's wonderful. Article B is to approve the expenditure. So $3,222,388, which the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It's estimated this proposed budget, if approved, will result in per pupil education spending of $11,894, which is 9.8% lower than per pupil spending for the current year. That's from the warning, Article 2. And that will be on the ballot on Tuesday as Article B. Article C, the final item is, shall the voters of North Bennington Graded School District approve an annual 26-27 tuition rate to the village school of North Bennington, the amount of $22,418 for pupils who are residents of the North Bennington Graded School District. And that's a yes or no. It is a double-sided ballot because we would vote in the Mount Anthony Union School District ballot as well, but these 3 items are our district on what side. And you can take a look at that here. Okay, so are there any questions about those 3 items? That would be Article 3 here. So if there's no questions on what's on the ballot for Tuesday, we can move to elect The Article 4 is to elect a school district clerk for the 2-year term commencing July 1st, 2026. So some in our village, you know, some, or sorry, in our district, it's a district meeting. In our district, some of the positions are just elected here on the live at the floor, and then others, whether it's because of state statute or because it's a general election, are done by the ballot. So we're gonna take care of a few positions here today. So what?
Did you just go over opportunity to ask questions about the ballot?
Yes,
So could somebody explain what's in the tuition that's not in the per pupil expense?
sure. Why don't we, if there's someone present here today who feels like they have, maybe a simplified or maybe just a way to explain that. Could we have Mr. Newbold, the head of school
I
here?
will also defer to any legislator who wants to step in to explain, but I think it's been very clear in all the news outlets over the last couple of years that education spending across the state is not understood by almost anybody. So they have all these numbers that they throw out. So the numbers that they throw out, when they talk about the allowable average daily attendance piece, that number tends to be a lot lower than the actual expenditures. So the actual expenditures tend to be more in the range of $20,000 per student across the state. And independent schools can only get funding through their tuition. So their tuition aligns more with what the actual spending is, where some of the public schools can get funding from all sorts of other outlets, including federal funds and things like that, that independent schools cannot get in any other way. So if we look at the data that's been put out, a better number to look at, besides those $11,000 or $13,000 for people spending, because that's not really accurate remotely, is something like the allowable average tuition. So the allowable average tuition is more in the range of $19,000 or $20,000 per student per year. So that's what it costs across the board to do it. Now, that's what the average is that they say if you're gonna send a student from here to go to Arlington, that's what they're putting that into it. It's not just independent schools, it's all the schools across the state. Now that, again, independent schools can only do their tuition or that average allowable tuition. At the end of the year, the public schools then recalculate what it actually costs. So what that tends to be is it tends to be about $2,000 or $3,000 higher than what they were saying was their allowable tuition. They're able to then recoup that cost from the state. They're able to ask for more money from the state. Independent schools don't have that. So they have to float somewhere between those two to try and compensate for that difference. So the average actual spending in the district is closer to those tuition rates than it is to those numbers that they're throwing out there, because there's a lot of, basically a lot of math that goes into that people don't really understand. Even I talked to Renee, and I sat down with Renee, who's our business manager here in the district, and I asked her, do you know where this multiplier comes in? And she doesn't really even understand how that multiplier comes in. And it has to do with I mean, so many different factors, and no one really has a clear understanding of it. So one of the things is hopefully through this whole education reform process, they come up with a way that's much simpler and more clearly defined by everybody. So that we can look at those numbers and actually compare them, because you can't compare some of the different numbers because they really don't align at all.
The $11,000 is like the state allowable number. It's got nothing to do with the actual cost.
Does that help you? Okay. Yep, thank you. Yeah.
Tim can also speak to that too. Folks who likes to do their own business. I'm Tim Payne, resident of Colorado, I also have the business superintendent of schools. School finance is purposely not transparent. I say that, even the elected officials in the room, but if you're interested in an explanation, we developed a one pager, which Tim is using too. Go on scsu.org, go into the superintendent's button, and it's a one pager that purposely looks like chutes and ladders in the front. On the back side, it'll actually give you the math and all the variables that Tim talks about, some of which you will vote for your school budget on this week. And then the legislature by law has to go and raise that money. So there are variables in how they determine funding that they have to change every year to say taxes not go as quickly rise or, meet the cost. So it's frustrating to explain to folks, but as Tim said, well, good faith effort to tell you what it's gonna cost to run your schools next year. And then the legislative process takes over, so, I appreciate your explanation.
There's a real basic difference in the content.
Yeah, absolutely, but if you wanna do more. Struggling with speed, you can check out the park lot and go from there.
Yeah, question here.
Would anybody like discuss this further? So David Durfee, I am a legislator, so I will speak as a legislator. I'm also treasurer of the Mount Anthony District and the SVSU. I'm not wearing that hat here, but I want to add to what's been said, which is all completely true. Two important numbers that we've just looked at on the slide here. One is the number of students estimated for next year, K to 6. I think it was 130. Is that right?
Yes,
So keep that number
that's
in
for the
mind.
case.
The other number is the average weighted pupil count, was on a different slide, which was 236.
Yep.
So not quite, but almost twice as many weighted pupils than there are actual pupils. How we come up with that weighted pupils is part of the complicated, how do we get at this number that Renee and most of us can't easily understand. But note that that's about twice as much, twice as many pupils. That explains a lot of the difference between the $21,000 tuition that the schools locally are charging and the average spending per weighted pupil. It's not per pupil, it's per weighted pupil. So a weighted pupil, by the way, means if you've got a student who comes from poverty, doesn't speak English well, so those numbers are, those factors are used to weight the number of pupils and basically lower our tax rates is the purpose of doing that. But I think that fundamentally, the question that you're asking, Avery, why is the tuition for a pupil $21,000 when this other spending per weighted pupil is half of that? It's because there are twice as many almost weighted pupils as there are actual kids in the district.
Right.
So, that helps a little bit.
Was there another question? Yes, Mr. Franklin.
Yeah, I have some questions along the same lines of the last meeting, and where we landed is that this is just a little black box that's come up again. And I think it would be really helpful if there was just a slide in this meeting that very simply summarized these high level talking points of like, this is roughly how we're getting there. I think that comment about like twice as many weighted pupils, and then talking about like what the actual average state tuition is really rounding out to be versus what the village is asking for. I think those high level points would allow us to move a little more. Sure.
Well, David.
Thank you.
So the actual long-term average daily membership of the district for K6, the elementary, is 158.50. That's how many students we have this year. But it's a 2-year weighted average, so it includes last year. So that's how you end up with the total that creates this number of 11,074.
So any further questions related to the ballot items for vote on Tuesday? The other items of business are to elect a school district clerk for a 2-year term commencing July 1st, 2026. That's Article 4. Is there a nomination for school district clerk for the North Bennington Graded School District?
I'll nominate Lori Elwell.
Thank you.
I'll
There's
second that.
There's a second.
You're welcome.
And any discussion on the nomination? All those in favor of Lori Clerk for the district, clerk for the North Bennington Graded School District, please indicate by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. To the Article 5 is to elect a moderator for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2026. That's the position that I'm currently executing here. Or attempting to anyways. I'm happy to do this again next year. Okay, thank you. Second, and I will, are there any other nominations? Sorry if I didn't do that last time, but that was unanimous, so. They're hearing no further nominations. All those in favor of myself as the moderator for next year, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for your support. We'll record that. And for Article 6 is to elect a delinquent tax collector for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2026. And I think, if there was some confusion with the slide, I think, I think we can conduct our business from the floor and Mr. Bucci feels like indicated from the minutes from last year, this was a floor vote that was a 1-year term, so we'll go ahead with any nominations for delinquent tax collector for a 1-year term.
I nominate Doug Bucci.
It's been a nomination. Is there a second for that nomination? There's a second. Are there any other nominations for delinquent tax collector? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of Doug Bucci for the delinquent tax collector, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And is there any other business that, from the floor that would like to be conducted today? So this is, of course, relating to the graded school district. So if there are any items that citizens or members would like to raise today, we're happy to entertain any floor motions or comments or questions that we have here today. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Jenkins and I'm struggling with cold, so, I am new to the village, sort of. I moved here 3 years ago, but I have a lot of years of, my kids being involved in things in the village. And, I guess I wanted to bring up Act 73, and we have, almost our entire delegation here. So the village, I think, should be very proud that when Act 73 passed, it really changed the landscape of independent schools in the state, and it continues to impact us, and depending on how redistricting turns out, and the leadership that Senator Bungartz has shown us, turns out, it can impact us much further. There are over 100 independent schools in the state, and only 18 of them were able to pass the hoops that Act 73 put in place. And of those 18 schools, only 5 of them are elementary schools, K through 6. 2 of those 5 schools are in the village of North Bennington, which is remarkable. It says quite a bit about our educators and their dedication, and our community and how much we care about education. And of course, those 2 schools are the village school and South Shore Community School. I'm sort of embarrassed to say this, but it was only 2 weeks ago that I realized that the Prudential Committee and the North Bennington Graded School Board were different. And And it was only because I
No,
started
no,
looking
no.
at who was on the board.
The
I'm like, I
Prudential
get
Committee
this.
is the
Um,
North Bennington Board.
No.
The Prudential Committee is the North Bennington.
So,
That's not-
so then I am still confused.
No.
Okay, so I think what I would ask is, given the precarious state that we're in right now. And I think, behind the scenes, Ray has been an incredible,
That's right.
conduit of information, to the SVSU for us. He sat down with Southshire, I'm on the board of Southshire School. He sat down with the Sustainability Committee of Southshire. And we have been working together. I would hope that next year when we have this meeting, that we are looking at not only the village schools budget and needs, but also Southshire's. I get the Southshire is 33 students compared to 100 students, whatever, 120, whatever it is. But over half of our students are coming from the village, so, you know, I was just, I don't know, it's been very confusing trying to parse all this out. I think that we are a very rich community educationally, and I want to see us take advantage of that to the extent that we can. So thank you.
So if I may comment. I don't want to comment on that. I just want to point out that, there are a couple of dedications in the annual report. One is to Robert Nolan, who for 29 years taught sixth grade at the North Bennington Graded School. And then he and his wife spent 25 years cleaning the school as well. And he was a fireman. And last year we had a dedication for him, in part written by one of our citizens, Robert Nowak, who actually was in his sixth grade class. And it was quite amusing. At any rate, Robert died last October. And so I made a note of that. And then we had a very notable teacher for many parents and students who went through this school. Pat Gibbons, who retired, and I wrote a note about her extraordinary contributions to this community and to the students that came through this school. I appreciate it if people will read it. Thank you.
Anything further from the floor? Or we entertain a motion to adjourn?
So a quick thing,
Yes, Mr.
since we
Sawyer.
do have our legislatures here, if we could possibly get any sort of update on the state of
Yes.
redistricting and what that might look like for our schools, for Southshire, for the
Right.
village school. I know it's a long, complicated process, but in some sort of layman's terms for us that are here today.
So I'll try to do it, several parts. I'll try to do this succinctly as I can.
Thank you.
It's so complex, but I think what we have so many, I don't know where to start. This in a simple, well, one way to think about this is that there's a bit of a conflict of educational philosophies between the two bodies. And the House has a proposal, the House Education Chair's proposal would eliminate supervisory unions. Supervisory unions are the only thing that allow us to, this school, Burton, Long Trail, Southshire, to continue. And so the House Chair's proposal would, by eliminating SUs, effectively bring, to the extent they were able to survive at all as entities, a school like this under the umbrella of the supervisory district. You could have only supervisory districts. The reality is most of these schools will be gone. And only a handful of perhaps formerly independent schools, which would then kind of, they would try to make public schools, would survive. So so the proposal that I've put forward is really the alternative, which has 11 SUs across Vermont in areas that have traditionally experienced the tuition program in independent schools. And part of the other thing going on along with that is the whole notion of rural Vermont versus more urban and one size fits all. And my committee spent some time before the session visiting some other, going to districts around Vermont. And then we've taken a lot of testimony, and a lot of the testimony we've taken has been from rural Vermont, like Essex County, the islands that have a lot of tuition and rely on that for, it's really kind of the lifeblood of their communities. Because if you take Essex County, for instance, a lot of them actually go to New Hampshire because that's where the parents work. There's basically there's nothing there, and they rely on a tuition program. So what I'm trying to do, and my committee, I think, is trying to do, is really look out for the interests of rural Vermont, which include the notion of independent schools and require SUs. And so the battle is really going to come down to whether we're able to maintain the SU system in parts of Vermont where it's central, where it's critical to having a school like this survive. And so on top of that, we do have the declining enrollment. Just to go back to the beginning a little bit, we've gone from about 120,000 kids in Vermont in the school system 20 years ago to about 85, 83, something like that now. So it's declining, and unfortunately, the projections are for continued decline. So that is one of the factors that we're dealing with. The other is, as has been noted, as Tim noted, the existing funding system is so Byzantine that almost literally nobody understands it. And it produces perverse results where you can have a community that actually has effectively no budget increase, but then if there are budget increases in other parts of Vermont, they get visited on the district that kept their spending low. And so it has the perverse effect of many districts like in Slate Valley, because the taxes are high, but they have a budget that doesn't go up at all, but they still vote no because the taxes are high. Even though if they voted yes and increased the budget, it wouldn't make any difference because of what's happening, being visited on them from the rest of the state. So the short way, maybe longer than it needed to be, is saying the current system is totally broken. And in the meantime, what we've been doing in the legislature is buying down the rate, which was also referenced here today. And so, because what happens is that in the shortest, simplest version, all those budgets voted all over Vermont go in, become one big number. And then the legislature's job at the core is to just set the multiplier to fund those. But what the legislature also does is use other sources of money to try to keep that down. And what we've done in the last several years is buy down the rate, because there's been some sort of surplus dollars, but that money is getting harder to find. And there was the Joint Fiscal Office did an analysis that was just released yesterday, I think, that showing that just to keep the rate of increase at 5% for the next 3 years would cost about $450 million. We don't have it. So we do have a problem. We have to get down the rate of increase in school spending. And the foundation formula will do that, because one of the other aspects of as I say, about the existing system is that it's almost ingenious, is because nobody's responsible. Because budgets are voted all over Vermont, just one big number is produced and the effects get visited on everybody else. And the legislature's only job is actually to set the multiplier and then maybe to try to find some money to hold down the rate. But with the foundation formula, at least somebody will be responsible because it will be the legislature, because the foundation formula has a fixed multiplier built in. It's effectively CPI. It's actually different indices, but it's slightly different factors, but you could call it CPI. Starts with a base and then has a fixed rate of increase so that we will control the rate of increase in school spending if we can get the foundation formula in place. And what we're trying to do in the meantime, because that's going to require transition, is do something to hold down the rate of increase across the state now, which is not going to be easy because of all the factors that we're all dealing, every school is dealing with. But so we have this really difficult situation where Vermonters are having a hard time paying their property taxes. And we have to do something about the rate of increase because the rate of increase has been in double digits for the last several years, and that is likely to continue. And that's not sustainable. So we have to, on the one hand, schools are under stress as it is, and we know that, and yet we have to hold down the rate of increase. And that's why this whole notion of trying to reform the system to make it more efficient is going on. But that effort to reform has brought out deep ideological divides that are making it hard to move forward. So, but I think it's going to come down in the end to, as it relates to me, I'm very dedicated to the continuation of SUs. I think the current system, the system as we know it, can't continue without SUs. The House Education Chair sees it differently, and it's a little bit more of, that's a lot more of sort of one size fits all versus the diversity of systems that we have in Vermont, many of which are working really, really well. And I'm not sure why we'd want to kill them.
Is the Senate's proposal for the 11 different SU districts, is that available to see online?
Yes, it's on the House, the Senate Education page. It's probably been on several days. If you just, do you know how to do it? Do you know how to get there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You'll find it. It's there. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to know how to get there? If you could share that, just.
If you just, yeah.
I can help you with that.
Okay.
So on the SVSU page, now I feel like an advertisement, there's an Act 73 button. And your article, you were the digger with the House's proposals, your map.
Yep.
And your explanation and the digger article. We'll put that all up on the Act 73 button on Monday. Just give me time to get back to the office, and that'll make it easier for folks. So then you can see the House and the Senate. It was put out by agencies. So.
And so one thing I would add to that, you can see the map, but with that map was a couple of pages of explanation. And so that's as important to see as, and I don't know, Tim, if you have that up or not, but if not, can find that on. So you just type in Vermont Legislature, go to Vermont Legislature, then go to committees, then go to Senate Education Committee, and you can scroll down and see the different days. You might have to look for a few days to see that map and the explanation come up, but it's there. It's been there several times.
And as your constituents, do you have a recommendation for citizens who are concerned about the House's proposal on how to note our disapproval of going forward with something like that?
I think our delegation is pretty solid, but keep talking to people.
Okay.
And there's going to be, there will be in the end a lot of pressure to go along. And so that's where rubber's going to meet the road. We really have to, in my view, I'm never going to budge on SUs. And protect and making it possible for this kind of a school to continue to survive, and for rural Vermont to have a voice in its future. But that's what the battle's going to come down to in the end. Yeah.
So we have other legislators here, and I'm wondering if they have anything to offer on how they feel about what's happening with Act 73. So David and, Mary and Kim. Corcoran. Rob.
And Mike.
And Robert, I didn't see everybody, so, yeah, sorry. So, anybody, from that group who wants to come up and say a few words, I'd appreciate it. Gary.
I'll start, because I'll be quick. You just heard from Seth on where he is in terms of best use, sort of the
You know,
protection of what's happened. We're pretty much exactly aligned on this. We have some, well, Act 73 was something that perhaps maybe it could have been done a little bit differently, but the end of the session last year was something that was very, very tight. But Seth and I are very well aligned, just so folks know. The Senate right now has 17 Democrats, 13 Republicans. Republicans generally are kind of more aligned with the SU way to go. And having two senators that can join with them is very powerful. We saw at the end. So we're pretty much aligned on that. My only other comment is, this is my second year there. We prepare for town meeting week to give updates, but it feels like it's way too soon. The way the legislature works is that it's cut into two sections during the year. And then there's a crossover date where House works on their bills, Senate works on their bills, and then that crossover, they switch over. So right now, we can't really say what really going to happen at the end of the session. And as you know, there are two radically different things that are happening in the House and in the Senate on education. So it's in the coming weeks and well, a couple of months that really paying more attention to what's going to be happening when the bills have crossed over. That really will be more where information needs to be sent right away, because right now it's kind of percolating. It's next week, not this next week, but the week after. That's the last week before crossover. So that's when really things are going to be coming together in each body of the House. And then we'll see at the end of the week exactly what flushes out. So that's sort of my 2 cents on where we are with this right now.
I would agree with what has been said by our other legislators from the beginning. I did not support having our independent schools be put in a position where, I mean, that we would not be part of the education funding system in the way you should be. And I'm still a little concerned about, and I appreciate that Seth has put forward the 11 supervisory union districts. I was actually back when Act 30 was Act 60 was implemented 30 years ago, and it was confusing then. And like everyone has said, you couldn't explain to anyone. I remember them sending us home to explain it at town meeting. And still makes no sense. These issues should not be about whether the Republican or Democrat. It is common sense, the importance of our small schools like North Bennington, and I'm saying it because I'm standing here in North Bennington, should be protected and survive through this process. You've got to do this very thoughtfully and realistically, and what we come up with the final draft. But as we've said, there's not a formal plan in front of us. So it's hard to say I'm totally in favor of one thing or another because we don't have a bill to read. And really, that's the other difficult part of this type of legislation, because we're literally handed to it sometimes a couple of days before we're voting on it. I always like to go back to get our real-time figures. I know, that Act 60 was looked at a number of years ago to be replaced by, and I'll say the Republican Party, and they said repeal and replace was the statement, and I have an hour after my name, though I'm more independent. I want to look at what the reality of issues are and how they're going to affect our communities. And I said, well, that's great, you're going to repeal it. Yes, there are a lot of concerns within it, but what are you replacing it with? And no one really had an idea how to do that. They had put some formula out that used 2- and 3-year-old figures. And you were in the hole before you even started. So I said, you know, I'm not supporting it, and I was the only, if you want, if we're talking about, you know, what party you are that voted against it, because it made no sense. You've got to do this thoughtfully and carefully and keep hold as many districts and schools harmless as we can. But we right now do not have a formal plan in front of us, but we will try to update as this rolls out.
Thank you. David or Tim?
I mean, there's really not much to add, you know, I agree with obviously Seth and Rob and Eric, you know, there's two fundamentally different approaches from the House and then the Senate, and, you know, I can just speak for me personally is that I think we're committed as a delegation down here in Bennington is that we're gonna do obviously what's best for our area, you know, and I give kudos to, you know, Seth, you got beat up quite a bit. You know, for doing a hell of a job of trying to keep the independent school alive and well. And he deserves great credit for that, and he's gonna continue to do that. And, you know, and we're gonna continue to do what we need to do to, you know, from my standpoint, to, you know, keep North Bennington whole. And it's, you know, I will say, the governor really, you know, in my 24 years, I don't think he's ever really come out and sort of made a threat like he has. He's basically said there will be no budget until he gets education package that he's willing to sign off for. Not saying that we gotta bow down to that, but that's what we're dealing with at the end of the day, is that there will be no budget. So as Seth said, there's gonna be tremendous pressure on us to get a deal at the end of the day. And, you know, I know in the House right now, you know, our crossover date is typically a week after town meeting week, and our House education is not gonna beat that, so those will be an extension. And you know, because they're continuing to work, I am not, I think if they had to do a vote right now, they probably wouldn't be able to get a bill out of committee for us to even consider. So there's just so many balls up in the air right now. And as Mary said, there's really nothing in front of us, but I can just say, personally, that I am, you know, committed to, you know, like I said, voting for what's in the best interest for the district that I represent.
John? I have a question.
What?
I have a question.
Question here? Yeah.
It relates, I think, but it's, you know, the elephant in the room is healthcare. What's driving every bit of the cost increases, in education spending. Is there any relevant legislation or work being done on that end in this session?
Yeah, we're trying. I don't know how relevant it is in terms of impact it will have on this question or any of our insurance bills. So much of that is regulated at the federal level, or it's a function of the cost of healthcare that we have some but little control over. But there, as far as how could we do something that would have an actual impact on school budgets or tax rates, that would be moving the cost of health insurance out of the education fund and putting it in the general fund. And I think that there's a good argument for that because you can't control it as school board members. But the question then would be, how do we, if it goes in the general fund, are we gonna raise income taxes to pay for it, or are we gonna cut something else? Or are we gonna raise some kind of other tax, or are we gonna cut something out? So that's sort of the problem that stays there. I'm sorry, not terribly helpful, not like an encouraging answer, Matt, but that's,
I didn't expect one.
yeah. You wanna,
I just have two things that we did do a couple of things last year that we haven't really seen yet. One was reducing the hospital administered drug costs. So that probably brought some costs down. We also moved to reference-based pricing, which hasn't started yet. But in 2027, that will start, and that's hopefully going to bring some of those costs down. But just actually a plug for tomorrow. In Bennington, we have Senator Ginny Lyons, who's the chair of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. She's coming down to Bennington. She's going to talk with us, with the new CEO of SBMC and Kayla Davis from Arlington about these healthcare issues. So we might have a little bit more information tomorrow. I think it's a little early to say what's going to happen in this session. We don't really know right yet, but tomorrow we're going to have a forum that's going to have a little bit more information.
11 to 12:30 at the firehouse side of us. Got Judy Lyons coming down and it's really talk about the efforts being taken there.
That's Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Sunday.
We got snowed out last week, but that was okay. We got it, so that's what happened.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, Jeannie's point, yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot to add, unless I'm gonna start making stuff up. So, I mean, I think it's early in this process, in the sense of, as others have said, we haven't seen anything, so to really comment on it fully, but I guess in response to Love's question, I'd say, you know, the delegation, we all want to hear from folks throughout this, so, you know, there's gonna be more updates to come. Please reach out during this process.
Okay. Cool. Anything further before we adjourn?
Can I just play this all back to make sure that I'm following the right takeaways? It sounds like preserving the supervisory union is a really important part, or a critical part of maintaining our independent schools. It also sounds like reworking the foundation formula is going to be critical to that. So that's another key thing to be watching out for as new legislation comes out. In a couple of weeks will be the crossover date. What I sort of gathered, and correct me here, as needed, is that's when the House and Senate will come together and flesh out a bill. So in the next couple of weeks, we should expect to see a bill that we can start to wrap our arms around.
I think the things that have been developed in the House are given over to the Senate to review, and the things that were being developed in the Senate are given over to the House to review. So it's crossover in that way, but it doesn't mean that they're working on a similar bill yet. They have to review what has been done in the other House first, and then you see where you're aligned and where you're not aligned.
All right, so bill is further down the line.
Yes.
Okay, with that in mind, just a sense of timeline here, when should we expect to see something we can start to understand and wrap our arms around as a community, especially given, you know, the governor is saying that he will approve a budget without this, you know, what is that timeline? I think that's me.
The next two or three is things.
Okay.
And how the bills are.
Pay attention to the Senate and.
I think it's an unusual session, Lee. It's, you have to say that, you know, in some sessions, you have bills that come out right away because people are really excited about them and there's a lot of support, but then this is a really, really challenging session, so. That could mean that things get dragged way out, or maybe if there's a coalition around a certain thing. Do something earlier, but if there's any year to pay very close attention, this is the one. And, starting now, so. Any other, questions? I'm gonna go ahead and ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Ms. Manning, and a second? Second, by Mr. Johnson, thank you very much. All those in favor of adjournment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and if you would like to stick around, Mr. Newbold, the head of school, has a presentation that's specific to the school. These updates are on the website and in the annual report as well. Thank you all very much for being here.
Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, so damn cold.
I haven't actually had to do it. Oh, you're right.
Okay, there are.
Oh, well, I got you. But you're right.